happens when a nation once thought defenseless turns the hunter into the hunted. In the dawn light over southern Ukraine, the roar of MiG-29 engines broke the silence. Not for defense, but for a strike mission deep into Russian-controlled territory. Radar arrays snapped awake, sirens blared across occupied zones, and within seconds, one of the most sophisticated air defense systems on Earth, Russia's S-400 Triumph, was on full alert. The skies that day would become a chessboard of electronic deception and technological nerve, a contest between stealth speed and survival. According to field data published by Defense News in September 2025, Ukraine's Air Force has shifted from defensive sorties to high-precision deep strike operations. The MiG-29s, retrofitted under NATO's Phoenix upgrade program, now carry Western-made avionics, Link 16 data links, and multispectral jammers capable of distorting Russian radar returns by up to 60%. Paired with Turkish TB2 drones acting as decoys, these jets form a hunter-killer network designed to provoke Russian SAM sites into revealing their positions. On this particular mission, codenamed Raven Climb, Ukrainian pilots descended to just 100 feet above ground level, hugging riverbeds and forest lines to avoid early detection. Satellite relays from US Space Command fed them real-time updates on Russian radar sweeps. Each second mattered. Every blip on their threat receiver could mean death. When Russian early warning radars in Crimea suddenly shifted frequency bands, it signaled that the S-400's engagement envelope was opening. The hunt was on. Within moments, Russian Su-30SM fighters were scrambled from Belbek Air Base. The tactical situation changed instantly. The MiG-29 flight lead call sign Falcon 2 knew that if they climbed to launch range, they would light up on radar like flares in the night. The plan depended entirely on timing and deception. A TB2 drone orbiting miles away suddenly boosted its radar signature to mimic a formation of incoming jets. The S-400 battery, fooled by the signal, launched two 48 N6DM missiles at the decoy. That brief distraction cracked open the door for Falcon 2's real attack run. Western defense analysts from Jane's note that Ukraine's adaptation of low-altitude penetration tactics mirrors Cold War doctrines once used by NATO against Soviet defenses in East Germany. The principle is simple but deadly: stay below the radar horizon until the last possible moment, then strike before the enemy can reacquire you. Yet in modern warfare, low-flying aircraft face a new nemesis: short-range infrared systems and AI-guided drones. To counter this, Ukraine equipped its MiGs with Spectra Light, a compact electronic warfare pod developed in cooperation with French engineers, capable of spoofing both radar and infrared locks simultaneously. As the jets threaded through the valley, the earth itself seemed to vibrate from the overlapping sound waves of their turbines. One wrong move, one power surge, and the S-400's radar claws would seize them mid-air. At that altitude, the pilot has 2 seconds to react to a missile launch. Retired RAF Group Captain Richard Hall told BBC Defense Review. It's like driving a Formula One car through a minefield at night. When the first radar warning tones screamed through the cockpit, it wasn't fear that gripped Falcon 2, but calculation. The TB2 had done its job, but the Russian IADS was adapting faster than expected. New data streams suggested a secondary radar array farther north, likely an S-300V4 site, had begun triangulating the MiG's position. The valley that once offered cover was turning into a trap. The Ukrainian pilots had to choose abort or press deeper. Their mission objective: neutralize a command and control hub coordinating drone strikes on Odessa, demanded risk. If they turn back now, one Pentagon analyst later remarked, Russia keeps control of the skies. If they press forward, they might redefine air warfare for small nations everywhere. How could such legacy aircraft designed in the 1980s now outsmart one of the world's most advanced integrated defense networks? Could battlefield innovation truly outweigh billion-dollar arsenals? As the MiG-29 surged forward, a deadly glow lit up the horizon. Russian air defense radars had locked on. The trap had been sprung. Within seconds, a pair of Tor M2 missiles streaked into the sky, followed by the deeper roar of Buk M3 batteries stationed near Melitopol. The Ukrainian pilots, already flying just meters above the tree line, had no margin for error. Each missile closed the distance at over Mach 3, leaving no time for traditional countermeasures. At that instant, the operation's invisible hand came into play. Electronic electronic warfare. High above the front line, an American-made EW drone part of the Black Lark program, recently acknowledged by Reuters Defense in August 2025, activated its full-spectrum jamming suite. The airspace flickered in invisible static. Russian tracking radars accustomed to clean returns were suddenly blinded by phantom echoes. The battlefield dissolved into chaos. Meanwhile, one of the TB2 drones launched earlier reappeared diving toward the nearest radar dish. Its mission was suicide to flood the system with false radar data and create what NATO tacticians call an electronic smoke curtain. Within that electromagnetic fog, the MiG-29s veered off their plotted course, slicing westward before arcing back toward the target zone. The tactic worked mostly. One of the MiGs took shrapnel damage as a missile exploded nearby, but the formation endured. Using onboard passive sensors, the flight computers recalculated a new ingress route improvised dangerous but viable. That maneuver was something only human instinct could pull off, commented Colonel James Whitmore, a US Air Force instructor at Ramstein. AI could have aborted, but humans read chaos differently. Under the cover of jamming, the Ukrainian jets executed what analysts at Defense News describe as a reverse weave, using sudden altitude shifts to confuse missile guidance logic. Russian SAMs require a stable lock for at least 3 seconds. By breaking pattern every 2.5 seconds, the pilots tricked the system into overcompensation. It was warfare measured in microseconds. As the MiGs burst from the haze, they found themselves directly above the enemy's radar control hub. Yet something unexpected emerged: new radar emissions previously silent now pulsed from mobile Panzer units that had redeployed during the confusion. The Panzer S-1, armed with radar-guided 57E6 missiles, posed a lethal threat at low altitude. This is where the true evolution of modern combat lies, noted DW's defense correspondent Marcus Ritter. We're seeing a duel not of numbers but of neural network software pitted against software. The Ukrainian pilots unleashed their next weapon, a wave of electromagnetic decoys dropped from modified flare dispensers. Unlike standard countermeasures, these devices mimicked the aircraft's radar signature across multiple frequencies, confusing Panzer targeting algorithms. The missiles veered off course, detonating harmlessly over open ground. For the first time in modern warfare, electronic smokescreens were being used not just to hide, but to outthink. On the ground, intercepted communications revealed the disarray among Russian crews. One officer was heard yelling, "We're firing at ghosts," according to the Guardian's intercepted battle audio report. The airspace became a storm of missiles, debris, and artificial signals, a theater where every side fought both real and digital enemies. But the clock was running. Ukrainian fuel reserves were dropping rapidly. Their EW drone, having overexerted its signal capacity, began losing synchronization. The static waned. The real battlefield began to re-emerge. And in that moment of clarity, the Russian systems recalibrated too late to prevent what came next. As the MiG-29s crossed the final ridge, they entered the attack window. The electronic fog had done its job. In their wake, the valley shimmered like a broken mirror, fragments of radar reflections scattering across the spectrum. Ukraine had just demonstrated that agility and improvisation backed by digital warfare could neutralize the brute strength of integrated air defenses. But could this kind of tactical improvisation hold if Russia integrated AI-based counterjamming, now rumored to be tested near Belgorod, or would the electromagnetic advantage begin to shift once again in the coming months? The decisive moment had come. Falcon 2 and his wingmen steadied their MiG-29s for the release, each armed with French-made AASM Hammer precision glide bombs. These were not standard-issue weapons. They were modified variants of the GBU-49s, previously integrated into Ukraine's Su-24 fleet. Under NATO's Joint Adaptive Weapons Program, the MiGs had been upgraded to carry them, giving Kyiv a strike capability once thought impossible for Soviet-era fighters. But the challenge was immense. Russian GPS denial systems blanketed the area, forcing the Ukrainian jets to switch the Hammers into dual-mode guidance inertial navigation coupled with infrared imaging. That meant the pilots had to climb briefly, breaking cover to give the bombs enough altitude for gliding trajectory. The maneuver was suicide territory. The moment they rose above the terrain, every radar in Crimea would see them. Those pilots flew into a wall of electronic fire, said retired USAF General Patrick Donovan in an interview with Reuters Global Security. No stealth, no invisibility cloak, just guts, timing, and 1980s airframes carrying 21st century weapons. As they ascended, Russian jammers howled to life. The electromagnetic spectrum turned hostile. Targeting screens flickered as their feed blurred. The pilot's helmet displays scrambled momentarily, a split second of blindness in a kill zone where milliseconds defined survival. rival. Yet amid that static, the hammer bombs released cleanly, 4 in total, each programmed with separate terminal angles and impact depths. The moment they detached, the MiGs broke formation, diving back into the terrain. Their radar warning receivers erupted as Russian air defense units realized the true nature of the strike. The sky turned into a storm of contrails, S-400 interceptors, and short-range missiles from Panzers alike scrambled to intercept. But this was where the brilliance of the Hammer's software came into play. The bombs gliding autonomously switched from satellite guidance to thermal targeting, locking onto the distinct heat signatures of Russian command trailers and relay antennas. Even as jamming attempted to obscure their sensors, the infrared contrast from running electronics guided them home. According to Jane's Defense Weekly, the Hammer system's micro-imager can detect and distinguish targets even under heavy EW disruption, a capability developed during France's counterterrorism operations in Mali. When the first explosion hit, the shockwave could be felt 30 kilometers away. Drone footage later analyzed by BBC World Monitoring confirmed 3 direct strikes on radar and communications nodes. The 4th bomb detonated near a fuel depot, igniting secondary explosions that engulfed the entire base. Smoke columns rose thousands of feet high, the first verified deep strike success using Western glide bombs on MiG platforms. Yet the success came at a price. Russian S-400 batteries retaliated instantly, launching a saturation barrage that blanketed the retreat corridor. The Ukrainian MiGs pulled 9G turns to escape countering with chaff bursts and high-speed dives. 2 R-77 missiles locked onto one jet, their radar seekers burning through electronic noise. The pilot rolled, inverted, dumped fuel to distort his heat signature and dove toward a canyon. One missile overshot, the other detonated prematurely, fooled by the decoy's echo. Those are maneuvers we used to think only F-16s could manage, commented aviation expert Lars Neumann to DW's Tactical Review. It shows how far Ukraine's integration of Western flight control software has come. The MiG is reborn as a digital predator. By the time they crossed the Dnipro River on their return leg, the Ukrainian pilots had only fumes left in their tanks. Below them, satellite-linked observation drones confirmed the impact. The Russian command hub was gone, its electronic footprint erased. For the first time in this war, Ukraine had penetrated the digital fortress of Russia's integrated air defense system, not by stealth, but by audacity. Still, the bigger question loomed: if Ukraine could adapt its aging fleet with modular Western tech, what would stop Russia from accelerating its own counter-upgrades, AI-enhanced radar discrimination, hypersonic interceptors, or fully autonomous drone swarms? Would this victory become the start of a new electronic arms race? The retaliation came faster than anyone predicted. Within 12 minutes of the Ukrainian strike, Russian Su-35s roared into the engagement zone, trailing contrails at 50,000 feet. Below them, surviving S-400 launchers fired a second barrage, not at the retreating MiGs this time, but at the skies ahead. The Russians were laying a wall of destruction, an aerial minefield designed to box the Ukrainians in. What unfolded next was not a simple escape. It was a duel of missile logic. Each R-77 and 48N-6DM missile carried an active radar seeker guided by predictive AI. The missiles didn't just chase heat, they anticipated movement. In response, the Ukrainian pilots unleashed a symphony of countermeasures. Flares, chaff, and electromagnetic bursts filled the air as their systems cycled between defensive modes faster than any human could manage. Much of that was thanks to Spectra Light, the Franco-Ukrainian EW pod installed under the MiG's fuselages. It analyzed radar waveforms in real time and injected spoofed echoes milliseconds before lock on a digital sleight of hand that turned each missile into a question mark. But Russia's missiles were not the only threat. From 40 kilometers east, the Zaslon M radar array of an Su-35 detected residual heat from one of the escaping MiGs. The fighter banked hard, left its engines screaming as 2 R-77s detached from their pylons. The first missile surged ahead. The second adjusted its course mid-flight using real-time data link input and innovation Moscow had quietly introduced in late 2024, according to Reuters Defense Insight. Inside the Ukrainian cockpit, the pilot's threat receiver wailed. He pulled a Cobra-style deceleration maneuver, pitching the jet's nose skyward to bleed speed, instantly forcing the pursuing missiles to overshoot. A second later, he punched the throttle again, diving into a low canyon to regain speed. Both missiles detonated harmlessly in the clouds above. It was a scene reminiscent of Cold War dogfights, but now supercharged by 21st century computation. High above the second MiG faced worse odds. With fuel nearly exhausted, evasive maneuvers were limited. He deployed his last countermeasures and skimmed across the waterline of the Dnipro. The missiles kept coming, one locked on his afterburner plume, the other followed the radar echo of his canopy. In a desperate gamble, the pilot shut down his engines, momentarily gliding in total silence. The heat-seeking missile lost its target and plunged into the river. The radar-guided missile, confused by the sudden loss of signal, veered off and self-destructed. Silence returned, broken only by the sound of the pilot restarting his engines. Western analysts later confirmed that Ukraine's pilots had used a tactic known as thermal vanishing, first tested by NATO's Red Flag exercises in 2023. It involved cutting power to mask heat emissions, a suicidal move unless perfectly timed. Yet it worked. This was a dogfight between man and machine, said Dr. Elaine Porter, a former Rand Corporation strategist speaking to BBC World Defense. It shows the continued value of human intuition, something no algorithm can yet replace. Meanwhile, Russian command centers scrambled to reassert control. S-400 operators tried to reprogram their interceptors mid-flight using satellite uplinks, but Ukraine's EW interference still jammed critical frequencies. The entire engagement zone became a storm of miscommunication missiles chasing ghosts, radar shadows multiplying by the second. By 09:46 a.m., the Ukrainian jets were out of danger. Behind them, the Russian base burned. Satellite images released by Al Jazeera World News hours later showed the wreckage of destroyed radar masts and communication trucks still smoldering. It was not just a tactical loss, it was a technological humiliation. The air battle that morning redefined modern aerial warfare. Legacy aircraft digital retrofits and precision glide munitions had outplayed one of the most complex integrated defense networks ever built. The balance of power in the electronic domain had shifted, if only slightly proof that adaptability could rival superiority. But for how long could Ukraine sustain these high-tech improvisations? Could the West continue supplying complex systems at this pace without revealing too much of its own electronic warfare secrets to Moscow? When dawn broke over the Black Sea the following day, the smoke plume from the destroyed Russian base still curled skyward, visible even from satellite imagery. What investigators discovered in the ruins would shock defense experts across Europe. Fragments of Ukraine's hammer munitions had not just exploded, they had adapted. Each carried an intelligent fuse designed to detonate in sequenced layers, an airburst, a surface penetration, and a delayed void explosion. It was a design previously reserved for NATO bunker busters, now re-engineered for glide bombs by Ukrainian technicians working with Polish contractors. According to a post-strike assessment by Jane's Defense Weekly, the cascading detonation pattern disabled the enemy's drone control relays, destroyed its fiber link infrastructure, and caused systemic paralysis across multiple Russian UAV operations from Kherson to Berdyansk. In other words, the strike didn't just destroy a base, it silenced an entire section of Russia's electronic battlefield. Western analysts quickly realized the implications. The precision of the attack meant Ukraine had reached a new frontier, not just kinetic strikes, but information warfare by munition design. By embedding adaptive fuses and programmable sensors, Ukraine's engineers effectively turned each bomb into a tactical virus capable of crippling command structures instead of merely leveling them. This is 21st century warfare in its purest form, wrote Dr. Martin Elwood, an EW specialist at King's College London, in a Guardian Defense Analysis column. The real explosion isn't physical, it's digital. It's the collapse of enemy coordination. In response, Russia began redeploying mobile radar units, spreading them farther apart to avoid cascading losses. But this exposed a deeper flaw in its doctrine. Decentralization reduced coverage, leaving temporary blind zones along the front. By late October 2025, NATO intelligence observed a 14% increase in unmonitored airspace over occupied zones, small but enough for Ukraine to exploit. Pentagon analysts pointed out that this adaptation war mirrored the evolution of code. Every update triggered a counter-update. The Hammer's success spurred urgent Russian experimentation with Krasuka M2 jammers, equipped with AI signal classifiers attempting to recognize false targets faster than humans could. But even those systems struggled to keep pace with Ukraine's constant software patching. It's the first digital arms race fought in real time, commented DW's military analyst Marcus Ritter. A war where algorithms duel as fiercely as pilots. On the battlefield, this innovation reshaped Ukraine's tactics. Instead of massed formations, small strike cells now operated autonomously, 3 jets, 1 EW drone, and 1 reconnaissance UAV, forming a modular kill chain that could improvise on the fly. American defense contractors under the Phoenix II Alliance program began testing similar team formations for U.S. Air Force units. What we're seeing in Ukraine, said Lockheed Martin's tactical systems engineer Alan Cruz to Reuters, isn't a preview, it's a prototype of future NATO warfare. At the same time, reports from Al Jazeera World suggested the Russian High Command had ordered emergency reinforcement of its electronic defense units around Crimea. Engineers were flown in from Kaliningrad to rebuild hardened nodes, and Iran quietly offered to share its experience countering Israeli standoff munitions. Yet experts warn that patching systems faster than they can be field tested may introduce new vulnerabilities, a digital version of battlefield fatigue. Still, what stunned observers most was the human side behind the numbers. Out of the 4 Ukrainian aircraft involved in Raven climb, all returned safely. That's a 100% survival rate in a mission that statistically should have seen half the squadron lost, noted a BBC World Military Desk report. The pilots' precision and discipline redefined what small air forces could achieve against a numerically superior enemy. And yet, beneath the celebration, one haunting question lingered in every Western briefing room. Had Ukraine just exposed NATO's best-kept electronic secrets to Russian censors during the operation? Could this victory, however spectacular, come at the cost of revealing tomorrow's warfighting code to Moscow? In the aftermath of Raven climb, the world watched closely. Within 48 hours, satellite data confirmed what many had already suspected: Russia's integrated air defense system, IADS, in southern Ukraine had suffered a rare systemic blackout. Entire radar grids had gone silent, command nodes were offline, and drone patrols over the Azov corridor dropped by nearly 60%. Western analysts described it as the first successful digital decapitation strike in a live theater of war. For Ukraine, this was more than a tactical triumph. It was proof that ingenuity could rival raw power. The operation had shown that even aging MiG-29s born in the 1980s Soviet doctrine could transform into precision instruments of modern electronic warfare when paired with Western software, artificial intelligence, and human adaptability. The lesson here, said Lieutenant General Thomas Reed of the U.S. European Command in an interview with Reuters, is that legacy platforms are no longer obsolete when information dominance replaces material superiority. Yet beneath the celebration, NATO planners read the deeper strategic signals. Raven climb was not only a Ukrainian success, it was a preview of tomorrow's wars. Western defense circles began referring to it as the algorithmic blitz, a new age where the decisive weapon is not the missile but the code that guides it. The success of adaptive Fuzes, self-correcting guidance systems, and semi-autonomous electronic warfare pods signaled a shift away from brute force deterrence toward precision disruption. Meanwhile, the Kremlin scrambled to reassert control. Russian state media downplayed the loss, claiming minimal damage, but internal communications intercepted by Western intelligence told a different story. In a leaked transcript reported by The Guardian, a Russian commander described complete sensor blindness across 2 southern sectors. For an army built on layered defense, the psychological impact was immense. The once feared S-400 network had been breached by 2 small MiGs and a handful of Western components. This triggered immediate changes in Russian military procurement. Moscow accelerated the deployment of its Nebo-M radar arrays with machine learning filters designed to detect low-altitude spoofing. The Ministry of Defense also pushed for the rapid production of MiG-35M fighters capable of counter-EW operations. But Western analysts remain skeptical. No amount of hardware will fix a software war, argued RAND's Dr. Elaine Porter on BBC World Analysis. Until Russia decentralizes its data architecture, it will always chase ghosts, and Ukraine will keep winning milliseconds. Across the Atlantic, the U.S. Air Force and NATO allies began quietly incorporating lessons from Raven climb into their doctrines. The idea of distributed lethality, once an abstract theory, now had a living example. Instead of vast fleets or billion-dollar stealth bombers, the future lay in adaptive ecosystems, cheap, smart, and expendable assets working in synchronized chaos. A senior official at the Pentagon, speaking anonymously to Defense News, admitted that Ukraine's strike may have advanced Western air doctrine by 5 years overnight. But behind the technical marvel and strategic analysis lies the human cost. Ukrainian engineers worked under blackout conditions, pilots trained in simulators powered by unstable electricity grids, and families listened to distant thunder knowing their sons were flying missions against impossible odds. Every innovation was paid for in exhaustion, risk, and defiance. They don't just fly machines, said DW's Marcus Ritter, they fly symbols, proof that the underdog still matters in the algorithmic age. By late October 2025, the skies above southern Ukraine had calmed, yet the silence was deceptive. Both sides were rewriting their software retuning radars and preparing for the next digital duel. Ukraine's Air Force had struck a blow that echoed beyond its borders, from NATO war rooms in Brussels to Chinese command centers in Shenzhen, where engineers studied the encounter for lessons of their own. As one analyst from Al Jazeera World Security Forum concluded, this battle wasn't about territory, it was about code cognition and courage. And in that sense, it may define how humanity fights its wars for decades to come. But the question remains, when the next confrontation comes, will machines still serve humans, or will algorithms decide who wins the skies? Raven Climb marked a watershed in modern air warfare. Ukrainian MiG-29s enhanced with Western avionics and glide munitions executed a deep strike that crippled Russia's S-400 network through deception, electronic smoke, and precision fusees. The operation blended old airframes with new code, proving that adaptability and information dominance can overturn superior firepower. Analysts from Reuters, BBC, and Defense News called it the first digital decapitation strike and attack that erased enemy coordination rather than simply destroying infrastructure. The aftermath forced both sides into a technological arms race. Russia sought AI-driven radars and counter-jamming tools, while NATO integrated Ukraine's modular strike doctrine into its next-generation planning. Beyond the hardware, Raven Climb symbolized a new era, wars fought not by numbers but by networks where milliseconds decide survival. It showed that courage, computation, and creativity together can rewrite the geometry of air combat. And as both blocs race to master autonomous warfare, the haunting question endures: when algorithms learn to fight faster than humans, who will command the future battlefield?